Welcome to another episode of Learning and Development Preparing Enterprises for Tomorrow. I'm glad to introduce to you Babita Karki, Chief People Officer, NIIT Ltd. Thank you, Babita, for your time and for allowing us to interview you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. We also have with us Mr. Dhawal Sharma, Head Solution Consulting, Coursera, APAC. Thank you, Dhawal, for your time and for your knowledge sharing. Babita, I begin with you. We see worldwide and even in India now that the ecosystem in which businesses are, running is changing very fast. The rate of change, the rate of development has become very fast-paced, right? And we feel that the pressure is then, translated to the L&D heads. People are looking and turning to you for solutionizing this change into organizations at a faster rate than the change itself, right?
Absolutely.
So how do you deal with this dilemma, and how do you stay ahead of the curve when you have to deliver this? Over to you.
Okay. So Sumedha, the starting point for all of this is to identify what are the learning priorities. Okay, so the learning priorities, for understanding the learning priorities, the HR and L&D team are required to be closely collaborating with the businesses and understanding what the business goals are, what the business challenges are. They need to know that. Then they also need to be understanding what the performance needs are coming through from the performance systems. So the performance systems have an integral part of the discussion, as how the individual is doing, what are the skill sets required, what is the career progression required, and all of those inputs feed into the L&D function. Then other than this, we also have the data and analytics that are supporting us now. So with the use of data and analytics, we know what are the gaps, skill gaps in the organization. We understand what the performance trends are, and we also understand what the missing learning objectives are that need to be fulfilled. So with all of this, the HR function is equipped to know what skill gaps are, and then the L&D function is able to strategize towards addressing the skill gaps. So they're able to look at strategies that need to be adopted to be able to fulfill these. And now when I'm looking at strategies, as you said, things have to be faster, it has to be more agile and so on. So technology is something that comes very, very handy when it comes to making these things happen. So when we say, how the learning outcomes are achieved through that, we have the learner management systems, for example, that are there in organizations which are used for learning administration, for learning management, those parts. We similarly have agile learning development with technology, and people are able to develop content much faster. So the speed part comes in there. Then we have interactive sessions possible with subject matter experts, with trainers, with experts. All of these are possible thanks to virtual medium. They are possible, and that gives a great speed to learning. And then in addition to this, engagement is very important, when we do it in the virtual mode. So fortunately, we have many options of gamification, of collaboration, of enabling mobile technology for everybody to learn. So making it very, very fast for businesses and also making it very, very productive.
Awesome. And I think you kind of touched upon the very, very pertinent notes when you said that you are looking at making it agile, you're making it virtual, right? But this then becomes the problem statement for you, Dhawal. I think I come to you, right? These are the expectations of enterprises, right? When they look at a solution, when they wish to roll it out in their organization from a partner such as yours, right? How you are, there are words being thrown at you that make it seamless, make it, interactive, engagement, what, Babita just mentioned. In the virtual world, it's very difficult to measure the engagement level, right? These challenges, how do you mitigate when you are addressing or solutionizing companies?
Right. So what we believe is that, leaving the product part aside, how do learners actually engage with the material? And, I'm kind of talking in a very online learning specific context. Even before that, we need to figure out certain basic truths, right? Who are the learners? What is the objective? Why are we even working with an organization, right? Because you can't just expect to have high engagement if such basic ground truths are not established already. For example, when we talk about the need for institutions to be agile, that need can arise in many forms, right? You might need to be agile in terms of, are you fast, for example, for a company like NIIT, are they fast enough to adopt new technologies, train their engineers so that they can then provide those services to their customers? So it's a very tech focused, very ability focused thing. The other thing is, talent agility, right? Are your people also able to shift in their perspective of how they need to be at their jobs, how well they need to understand the changing landscape, and so on. So when it comes to engagement, coming back to the engagement point, the first question for us is, why are we working with a customer, right? What is their objective, right? And that's when we figure out, okay, if the need of the customer is that we want to train, let's say, a use case, a very common use case that we see is that we have these software engineers and we want to turn them into data analysts or data engineers, right? And as we all know, upskilling people or kind of moving people internally is much easier and cheaper than hiring from the outside. Maybe not easier, but definitely cheaper, right? So given that kind of a use case, then we kind of know, okay, if this is the use case, this is the need of the customer, this is the kind of solution that needs to be in place. So in this specific example, we would know, okay, the objective is, and the learner group is engineers who need to reskill into a new role. So how do we design the program so that the learners are very aware of the goals that are set for them, right? Because ultimately, the biggest roadblock to learning and engagement is the question which comes in every learner's mind: why am I learning this? Where am I going to use this, right? So that question is at the heart of this conversation. So if that is the use case, we kind of implement a certain kind of program. If the use case is, okay, we need to make people generally literate about digital technologies, then we take a different approach, right? So the engagement is not just an inherent part of the product we are offering, it is also how we implement it. And how we implement it depends on understanding the needs of the customer first and foremost.
Wonderful. Thanks for bringing that up, Dhawal, because you bring us to a very pertinent question as to, for learning to happen, and Babita, I come to you for this one. For learning to happen, the learner has to be willing. More than a push, it has to be a pull factor, right? I'd want to, understand from your lens as to how do you create that, pull factor than just making it a push factor when you say, yes, you are looking at agility and all of that, right? How do you make the learners wanting to learn so that their career graph is being, charted out?
Yeah, it's very, very important for the pull factor to be there. And for that, we have multiple things in place. So for example, one of those is the competency management system. So for all the individuals in the company, we have a competency defined. We have the competencies defined. They know where they are with respect to their role on the competencies, right? And now it is up to them. It is their onus to look at going through training, whether it is on their own or through the company provided channels, and upskilling themselves and moving up on the career path through that. So they are very invested in doing it. They go through the training, they assess themselves, the supervisors will approve it. Only when they're really seen as on those competency levels, those levels are updated, and that is when they kind of get assessed for moving up the career path. So that is one of the methods. Other than that, we have something called NIIT lifelong learning. Okay, so that's something that we have had, for about a decade, where we encourage the NIITians to upskill themselves, to go through higher education programs, to undertake all of those and to be able to work on those. Then we have initiated something called a talent readiness program. This is something we started about 8 years ago. So in this, what is done is the individuals who want to move on to the next role, they nominate themselves. So they nominate themselves for the talent readiness program, and once they're approved for their nomination is approved by the supervisor, this is a 8-month program that they go through, which is a program which involves some coaching, some mentoring, some education, all of those sessions and so on, and with all of this, and then they move forward. So, these are some of the things, and other than this, we have, gamification is something that we use, badges is something that we use to say this is how much this person has done, and the performance conversations definitely include, what is it that the person learned, what is it that the person upskilled during the year. So that's, so that is something that pulls up from there to say, what have I learned, how have I moved on.
That's very critical. I think, stitching it into the performance appraisal, I think then it makes them very, involved in the whole training program.
And it's not just the individuals, it is also the leaders. So the leaders also carry targets around how their teams are nominating themselves and going through the talent readiness program and going ahead in that. Then another thing that we did this year, not this year rather, 2 years ago, we decided to move towards the direction of hiring many more freshers in the company. We said, rather than, that was a time when we were hiring 20% freshers and 80% were the senior lateral hires. So we said we have to look at how do we enhance career movement within the organization. So we said let's move towards 80% on fresher hiring, gradually move towards that target. And last year we were at a greater than 50% on fresher hiring. And when we do that, what happens is there is internal movement. So people know that all the internal movements or the promotions that are happening are being done internally. So we aren't really looking at lateral talent for senior roles. We are looking at the internal talent being promoted for that, and that is very motivating for everybody because there is so much more available for people to grow, and that is why they keep upskilling themselves and raising their hand to say, I'm ready, can we move up?
So they see a career growth within the organization than from looking out and then, engaging with the, the talent and the learning programs that you are rolling
Absolutely.
out. One more question that I think L&D leaders are faced with is that how do you ensure that these are not siloed? Like there's so many functions that are operating, right, in any organization. They're not siloed and it's comprehensive. Any thoughts around that? How do you stitch that story?
So you're right, cannot be siloed anymore. Whether it is the business leader or it is the individual or it is the L&D organization, all have to be equally invested. So that is why when we look at metrics of leaders, the metrics that leaders carry would be something like, are you hiring X percentage of freshers? Are you developing so many people? Are you promoting so many people into the talent readiness program? All of those are metrics that the leaders are looking at, which means that they are also pushed into looking at, is the competency of the individuals improving? So they are the ones who are pushing towards, so what was the competency of my teams, team members so and so, what is it improving? How is it improving? What are the steps being done? Whether I need to coach, whether I need an external coach, peer coach, what is it that so the entire onus has now shifted to the business teams. So the HR and L&D teams are the enablers, but the business teams are the ones who are demanding and also demanding the outcomes, and we are working towards those. So we are able to do that because it is the entire ecosystem working towards it.
That's fantastic, Babita, because when you say it's not just the onus of the HR and the L&D heads, right? They look up to you for the guidance, of course, but the moment business gets involved, it weaves the success story automatically. Dhawal, I come to you. Have you seen any other framework that has shaped up very successfully from your lens, because you are catering to 2,700 clients worldwide? Any story that you relate to or anything that you can share on a successful framework?
Sure. So one big shift and kind of a gradual shift we've seen over the last few years is that and this is reflective of the kind of trend the trends that you spoke about as well, that corporate learning and L&D, we've seen that companies realized, once they realize that it's better to promote internal mobility, like you are doing it in NIIT. It's and learning is not just a benefit; it's a strategic lever that you can use to grow and to kind of create that employer brand for yourself. We started seeing this shift of the last decade where, from learning being, like just something that, the companies provide as a benefit, where you have a bank of learning products, go and learn whatever you want. Gradually, we started seeing this shift towards, more focused approaches where companies said, we are investing in learning. How do we tie it to, our ultimate business goals, right? That's where we kind of started seeing this shift towards more skills-first learning, right? And Coursera also evolved in response to that, right? So initially, our genesis was, we were born, in a university campus. It was about making content widely available to whoever in the world wants to access it. To now, where we realize that when we work with companies, it has to be very focused. It has to be, the association has to start from what is the problem and how does developing skills solve that problem. So a framework for us now, the big thing for us now is skills first, right? Sometimes we used to, we use this internally, this phrase that skills pay the bills, right? That if a company like NIIT or any other organization has a business problem, there are multiple ways to solve for it. You can cut cost, you can, hire more marketing folks, etc., etc. Learning is one lever as well, right? Learning is not an end in itself. Obviously, learning for its own sake is a great thing. People, lifelong learning is just a great goal. But when it comes to an organization, a profit-making entity, learning is meant to achieve a certain business objective, which is why we kind of evolved from kind of a more access-based provider of content to a more strategic, skills-focused provider of learning solutions, right? So when we start working with customers, and even if the question is, we want content, we ask, why do you want content? What are the skills you're looking to develop? How do you are you looking to transform your talent in a certain way? What is the ultimate business problem, right? So thinking in those terms and evolving our product in those terms has enabled us to, mesh much more closely with our business customers as well, right? Because only when they realize that learning is a strategic lever and Coursera can be a strategic partner, do we see growth for both parties.
Wonderful, Dhawal. I think relating to what Babita spoke before and what you mentioned now, you are then reinforcing the need for the learner to associate, because the moment it's skill that stays with the learner forever, right? And then you are associating it with business outcomes. Babita, what particular business outcomes generally are you trying to drive, or you have been able to drive successfully, thanks to any L&D initiative that you might have rolled out in the past? Any example that you can showcase?
So business outcomes are like something that we start the learning development with. So with that in mind, so we have something called sales academies. We have sales academy, leadership academy, we have those academies. So we have the sales academy where the objective that the academy is working towards is the sales productivity. How do we improve the sales productivity? And we look at measuring it person wise. Person wise, how many sales are they making per week, per month, etc. And then when they go through the courses or when they go through the training, which is mentor driven, content driven and so on, then what is it that is happening? So the team is completely accountable to say how is the sales productivity improving. That is one. Then when we have people going through the leadership training programs, after that we look at, okay, what is the career enhancement that has happened after that? Have they been able to shift? Has there been a role change after that? Then the skill-based programs that they go through, we look at, okay, what is the pre and post, the score for that person after the training. So we are looking at those scores for them. So for every program, for behavioral training, we look at manager feedback after that to say, okay, how has the behavior improved? So for every training, the outcome, the business outcome is now intertwined. To say you've done this training, so it's no longer about person training days, to say how many person training days per person. That's the shift that has happened, because we used to measure those training days and that was, kind of fine with us. But now it has shifted to outcome. Unless there's a business outcome the team hasn't done its job.
So you may or might not continue with a certain initiative depending on the business outcome.
Absolutely. So we'll tweak the initiative to say, okay, if it did not deliver results, then maybe we have to change it in terms of a different trainer needs to come in, or if some, let's say, immersive training experience need to be brought in if the people are still not learning. So what can be some simulations, what can be some augmented reality based inputs that you bring in, what can be some immersive solutions that we can build in so that learning is more effective. So we change strategy basis that to say if business outcomes are not achieved, then what has to change, whether it is the duration of the training that changes, whether it is the kind of examples that we take, whether the case studies we take. All of those things are dependent on the outcomes.
Great. And Babita, what you just mentioned, augmented reality and these challenges, I think this is music to the ears of Dhawal, right? Dhawal, you are just solutioning these kind of outcomes, right? How have you been successfully driving ROI for other organizations and on these benchmarks that Babita just mentioned? Any thoughts on that?
The first thing is that any content that we build, it is built with the end objective in mind, right? And we call it, it's almost like a reverse methodology, right? So any new piece of content or a course that we commission from our university or industry partners, the first question is, what change will it bring in? What skill is it going to develop, right? And that's, from there we kind of work backwards to, okay, how do we test whether the skill has changed, and what kind of things or concepts would an instructor have to talk about or cover in the course to deliver those changes within the learner, right? So that's the first thing. So whatever we build and put on the platform, it's based or built with the end objective in mind. The second point is it's an assessment-led platform, right? So the metrics we track and we kind of want our customers to track are not usage metrics. How many hours spent, how many courses completed.
Exactly what she was mentioning.
Exactly, right?
Not the man hours spent.
Exactly, which is why we have built in assessments within each and every piece of content to ensure that we are not just taking learners at their word that I've done a course and I'm now an expert in such and such topic. It's only the assessments that can actually give you an objective sense of where a learner has reached. And a lot of our analytics that we provide to customers, they help them track that, right? So you obviously have the traditional metrics, hours and courses, etc. But our analytics also let learning leaders track somebody who started learning on Coursera a year ago on certain skills. Have they actually reached where we wanted them to reach or not, right? And all of that is based on an objective assessment engine which underlies everything, right? And the other thing is obviously, when we work with our enterprise customers, a lot of the change that is supposed to happen on the ground is something that you are going to observe, right? We are not we are obviously not embedded, we are not physically present there. So we like to build partnerships which are deep enough for us to get feedback from you on the kind of change you are seeing. For example, there's a fairly large financial services company in India, and like most financial services companies, they have a large sales force, right? And obviously, the traditional way of providing mobility is, okay, you give promotions or you move people to adjacent areas. If you're in sales, maybe, okay, move to marketing, right? But they realize that a lot of their salespeople have an aspiration to move into completely different areas like data science, right? How do you enable that? And to get that in a physical setting is extremely difficult. Firstly, because it's very prohibitive in terms of cost, and secondly, you don't even have so many experts in data who can kind of train such large groups of people. So they kind of they're working with us to move these salespeople who have been in the role for a number of years into something completely different, right? And the way we have worked with them is we have kind of set up programs which are going to take a certain amount of time, but they're deeply, they're very deeply immersive programs, and they're going to take a learner from who has basically no understanding of data to a level where they can play the role of a data analyst and eventually even data engineers and data scientists. So there are two. So to summarize, one is through the product. The way we have built the product is meant to always keep the outcome in mind, always give visibility into how outcomes are changing in real time, and secondly, work with our customers to kind of have that feedback loop going. What are you seeing on the ground? Are you seeing our managers seeing a change in their learners? Do we need to shift our strategy? Do we need to tweak our learning programs so that you actually see the changes if you're not already seeing them?
Great. Thank you, Babita, and thank you, Dhawal, for your precious time. And I think the key takeaways for me from this conversation is that, of course, how you create that pull factor for learners so that the learning becomes more engaging for the learner himself, and the fact that you mentioned that you've built it in their performance appraisal, right? That's another unique way of creating that pull. And Dhawal, what you mentioned at the end, where learning is not just linear. Like we start associating with a sales guy, how he or she can grow in that same linear path. You can look at a diverse set, a completely disassociated way of thinking, and give great opportunities to your employees, and increase that stickiness, and give them growth opportunity. Like you mentioned, Babita, that when you're going up the ranks, you're only looking at internal promotions rather than looking for lateral hiring. Great. Thank you for your insights, and thank you for sharing what's happening in your space. I'm sure it will be very, very useful for all the audience out there. Thank you, audience, for being with us on this episode. Thank you.
Thank you.